What's going on, do-it-yourselfers? Everybody wants to save money, especially in today's economy. The difference in $5 or $10 might be the difference in a gallon of milk to feed your kids. If you're someone who has noticed a slight spike in your water bill every month, it could be something as simple as a running toilet. So today I'm going to show you the simple step-by-step process on changing the fill valve and flapper inside your Commode. Let's get to it. Number one, there could be a ton of variations out here depending on what type of Commode it is that you have. Age is also a factor. If you got a brand new Commode, it's going to be vastly different than a Commode from 40 years ago. So the flappers, the fill valves, everything in between could be different from one toilet to the next. Before we start, make sure you know what you're dealing with and find out exactly what type of parts it is that you need. In most cases, regardless if it's an older Commode or not, they are meant to be upgraded, and Fluid Master has a ton of different options for you to choose from. And since I'm doing a bunch of contracted work, I personally invest in the contractor packs. And whenever it comes down to the flappers, you don't need the most expensive, the most generic type of flapper will do the job in many cases. Let's go ahead and get started. The very first thing you want to do is come down here beside your toilet and shut this angle stop in the off position. Righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. While you're down here, it doesn't hurt to make sure you don't have any leakage around the valve stem, the supply line, anything like that, because that's something you'll want to change while you're doing this job. Then we pull the cover off the back of the Commode, go ahead and flush it, and hold the handle up so that all the water in the tank will drain. There will be a little bit of water left in the bottom of this tank, which is exactly why having a shop vac is very handy. Reach down in there, you suck out all the remaining water. In the event that you don't have a shop vac, all you need is a bucket to put underneath the supply line. That supply line runs up from that angle stop and into the fill valve itself. And you also want to make sure that the angle stop is functioning properly by pulling this hose right here. If you got any water leaking out of this hose or out of this valve, it's just going to continuously run and put water back into the tank. Since the water is clearly still running here, we're going to go shut off the main water line. Since there is none on the water tank itself, we're going to have to shut it off on the inlet to the house. Simple bowl is sufficient enough to catch the water. Once again, pull up on the flapper, that way I can drain all the water out of the tank. Set the bowl underneath the angle stop. I'm going to grab my 6-inch channel lock pliers. Go ahead and loosen up the nut on the lower half of this supply line and get it off here. This is a PEX line, so it's a little bit tough. Some of these will have braided flex hoses around them, which is much easier to move. It allows any excess water to leak from the supply line and angle stop into the bowl. I personally would prefer to go ahead and change that angle stop, but that's something that the customer just does not want to do. You never know when you're going to get yourself into a situation with a busted liner and overflowing toilet where you need to shut that off in order to prevent further damage to your property. Quarter turn angle stop is much easier for elderly or children to shut off in the event of an emergency. The nut that goes from the supply line to the fill valve should be hand tight. In the event that it's too tight and you can't loosen it by hand, just grab yourself a set of channel lock pliers like these 420s right here, wrap them around that nut and then break it loose. If it's broke loose, it should be relatively easy to take it off by hand. You've got the nut on the bottom of the fill valve that needs to be pulled off. Simply readjust your channel lock, wrap them around the fastener, crack it loose, so it you can pull off by hand. And remove the old fill valve. The bucket will catch the rest of the water. And that alone is going to prevent you a lot of cleaning up. Now we're going to simply reach down in here and remove the old flapper. Unhook it from the flush handle. Put the old and new flapper side by side, you can get a pretty good idea on where you need to put the hook at. Go ahead and reinstall the new flapper. Just simply reach down here, put it around the hooks on each side. Hook it back up to your flush handle. Once again, your flush handle could be totally different than the one you're looking at right here, just depending on what type of tank it is that you have. They always have different holes for you to position that hook on your chain and flapper. Every time you raise up and down on it, you want it to be able to go down nice and flush. That way it blocks any water flow from escaping. Take out our new fill valve and get it ready. These kits do come with new hoses and hardware, such as this right here. A new nut for your supply line if needed. If you have to cut your PEX line and put on a new section, right here you are. This right here is an adapter for this hose right there. New nut for the fill valve. And this is your new seal, but the seal on the center does need to be taken off there. We push it down and pull it loose. This one is meant to be part of your supply line. It's good to have in the future because you never know when you might need it. We're going to take our new seal and put it on in this direction. At it to this point, you can remove this lock ring right here. That way you can adjust the length on the shaft of this fill valve. Stick it down inside the hole here and figure out where it is that you need it at. Some of these will be a lot taller than the tank itself and you'll need to adjust them down, or some situations you'll need to adjust them up. Either way, this float needs to be able to adjust up and down to match the amount of water that you need in your tank, and it cannot go over top of this. The black shaft right there does move in or out. As you can see, it's got plastic threads that go around it. So if you need to adjust it, you should easily be able to do that. Then we take our lock ring and push it back in place to ensure that everything stays where it's supposed to be at. And take it, put it down inside the tank and get it aligned properly. You don't want the float to be dragging on the side of the tank. You also want your hose to be in a position where it's going to come out and go down. We're going to take our lock nut and put it on the bottom of the fill valve. Up here, make sure to hold the top of the fill valve and then tighten this by hand. I don't want to over tighten it with pliers because then it could get stuck or you could crack your tank. Now we'll go ahead and reinsert our supply line and get our nut tightened down. With this hose, slide it over to this position. On this one, we slide it down inside the hole here. Ensures that it stays in place so that whenever the water's filling back up inside the tank, it goes down the tube. If you don't have that tube, that's where you put this adapter at. You lock your tube in right there. We're ready to turn the water back on, open up the angle stop, and get it leveled up. And I always recommend while you're down here, go ahead and check for leaks. Make sure there's no leaks on your supply line, any of the gaskets around your tank, the bolts, any of that stuff. It doesn't hurt to make sure that the toilet bowl is fastened down to the flange nice and secure. I personally like checking everything out when I'm dealing with something. That way it prevents the customer from having future problems. After the water is filling up here, you want to make sure it stops in the right position. As you can see right there, it does stop right below the neck. If you want more water in your tank, all you got to do is twist this to the right. You want less in it, you twist it to the left. Basically raises and lowers this float right here in order to shut it off. Now we'll go ahead and test out our flapper. Make sure that chain's in the right length, that way it doesn't hold the flapper up in the air and keep it from shutting. Everything appears to be good, ready to go. If this video happened to help you out, make sure you let us know by commenting down below. Otherwise, you can follow along by popping the clutch on that subscribe button or checking out all these social media platforms. But until next time, keep doing that do-it-yourself hustle.